Hey, beautiful people. There is so much going on. Grief, loss, rupture, no matter what it is, all of it, all of it rearranges the building blocks of who you are and who you will ever become. I've just sat with one of my most beautiful clients, and I could deeply sense that going on within them, that alchemical process of everything being rearranged inwardly to dissolve and to reform, the inward collapse, the breaking apart, the sorting of what remains and what falls away. It reminds me of a time I stood in a hospital doorway with sunlight on my face, not able to walk in, but yet being able to walk out. And I remember the day of discharge, this incredible physio come to me who I've been working with, and she said to me, I can give you a lift, jazzy wheelchair, and give you a lift, or shall we take the long, slow walk out of here? And she looked at me and she smiled. She went, I know what you're going to say. And I went, absolutely. Right, we're going to walk out of here. And I remember, what would take you and I a couple of minutes now took us maybe about a quarter of an hour. And that was a quarter of an hour of time that she really didn't have. However, I know that she knew how I left and how I moved out of that experience was going to define what come next. That is profound. I know she had that knowing that how I left that building, how I left that experience, how I left that place was going to define how I moved forwards. And I often talk about doorways, being really profound places. They're these liminal places. They're also the places the unseen tend to kind of hover, right? Now you can maybe understand why as well, because they are gateways, they're doorways that also hold codes and keys to initiation, right? And there are those of us that have been through initiation after initiation after initiation. I know I stood in that doorway, those sliding doors open, and I stood at a threshold, feeling that sunlight pouring onto my face, closing my eyes, unable to walk in but being able to walk out. I stood there and I said to myself, from this moment onwards, I will try to never waste a single moment. It changed me like nothing before. And I have gone through cycles of initiation. In alchemy, we would call this the blackening. And I think that I was moving through that as I went into hospital. And that was the stage where everything falls apart. Everything falls apart internally and sometimes, and more than not, outwardly too. Structures of identity, beliefs, attachment, they all begin to loosen. They decay or dissolve. They fall apart. Which is why Spirit talk about rupture and breakthrough. It can feel like a contraction. It can feel really confusing. A confusion, like even a kind of inner death. And that's alchemy. But it's not destruction for its own sake. It is a clearing. Alright? It is a kind of inner unveiling, where what is false, conditioned or imposed begins to loosen. It loosens its hold, not always gently. It can be brutal. Alchemy can be brutal, which is why it's initiation. And it's not for the faint-hearted. Now, what stays and what leaves? That is that process, what stays and what leaves. That is where the blackening begins to give way to what we would call in alchemy the whitening. Okay, and here, that's where the quiet reordering starts to take hold, and that's where me standing in that hospital doorway, that's where I met that threshold. The quiet reordering, not forced, more like what is essential starts to reveal itself, starts to rise up. The noise settles. That moment where I stood there and I could see it all with immense clarity, that's where the noise settles. That's a purification and also a simplification, right? So everything in my world, I just stretched back to simplicity, right? It was like understanding what was noise, what was junk, what really I didn't want to be carrying forwards with me. And what remains feels truer, even if it's still like feeling tender or somehow incomplete. And eventually that gives way to what we would call in alchemy, soul alchemy, the reddening, the integration, the embodiment, the new coherence, the new resonance, where something more authentic takes root. Now, none of it is a comfortable phrase. The reddening may be more comfortable, but those earlier phases are not comfortable. It can feel like being taken apart without a clear sense yet of what you're becoming. As the innate says, true healing is a fucking messy business. But the important thing is that this phase isn't random. It has a kind of intelligence to it. It's not just breaking, it's sorting. Because when you've had your world split in two, so much noise just falls away. You know, I can remember like stopping caring about being liked by everyone. You know, politics in every space become less important, especially where I find myself these days. It's like, you know, I don't want to be everybody's cup of tea. You know, politics across all spaces, you can see them for what they are. Hustle culture, pretending small talk matters, trends, impressing people who don't know our story. Arguing over things that won't matter in 2 days, 2 weeks. You know, shrinking myself to make others comfortable. You know, kind of that sort of energy rearranges your values without even asking fricking permission. Those initiations, those rites of passage rearranges your values without even asking permission. And it makes you fiercely protective of your time, your energy, what really actually matters, and the people you care about. And what's left is love, safety, truth, depth, and importantly, the people who show up. Everything else just doesn't hold the same weight anymore. Now, if you're feeling this and you feel like you don't care about the things you used to, you are not broken. You are being recalibrated. These are my beliefs, and no, I cannot recommend a book. It must come from inside of you because it is pure gnosis. As always, sending you all so much love. Keep shining.